Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Veg Grower Podcast. My name's Richard and I want to encourage and inspire you to grow more of your own food. And I do this by sharing exactly what I've been up to in my own allotment and my own garden. Now this week we are here. It is December. It's a bit of a dark and gloomy month, but there's several things that I really like to do throughout December. And one of those things is going to be sorting out our seeds and planning for 2025. We've also got this month's seed of the month, which is a good one to grow throughout December. So without much ado, let's get into it. Come meet me outside in the shed. Well, these dark December evenings are upon us now, and December I always think is a good month to really start planning for 2025. And for me, one of the first stages that we need to do is actually to go through our seed collection and see what seeds we have, what seeds we need to get rid of, and what seeds we need to order in. Now, I do this on a regular basis every year. I do end up with lots and lots of seeds. So I keep all my seeds inside wooden boxes, which live inside an old fridge here in the shed. And every December, I pull each box out and I will go through all the seeds that I have, making a note of what seeds I have. But any seeds that are out of date will go to one side, and any seeds that the pack is open on will also go to one side as well. Now, when I've gone through all my seeds, I've listed them all out as to what I have. I try and pot all my seeds back in an organised fashion as well. Try and keep them in alphabetical order. And I've got boxes for brassicas, boxes for legumes, boxes for some of the other types of seeds, just so I can be a little bit more organised. But the packets that I've put to one side, so these are the packets that are either out of date or I've opened them up already. Now, the thing is with both of these, when you open a packet up, you're basically breaking the seal, and it means that they may not germinate as well when we plant them out. And it's the same with the use by date. Now, unlike when we're dealing with food, what use by date on seeds does not mean they're going to destroy or rot away or anything. They're going to go off. What it basically means is that the company that sold the seeds have done tests and found the germination rate to be not as good past a certain date. So for them to sell seeds, they have to have a fairly decent germination rate for them to be sold. But after a certain amount of time, these seeds will lose vigour and therefore may not germinate as well. Now, that's not to say they won't germinate. We've had plenty of stories of people who have sown seeds that are 8 years out of date, even 30 years out of date, and they have still germinated absolutely fine. It's a lot about storage and things like that, a lot of factors that come into play. Now, usually I would say I hate getting rid of anything. I hate throwing anything out. But for me, the use by date, because I have so many seeds and, my fridge can get very, very full, the use by date is my cut-off point. I use that as a reason to remove those seeds. But also seed packets that are open, I also use to remove as well, because I've opened them up, I've sown a few seeds. They may have been successful this year, but I'm of the view we can always get more seeds. Now, I may not necessarily throw all these seeds that I've put to one side away. If some of these seeds that I can use in the kitchen for things like microgreens or sprouting seeds, they will be used for that. And I'm going to be talking about that a little bit later on. But if they cannot be used for anything else, then unfortunately they do go in the bin. However, they could also be donated to seed swaps. I would be worried about doing that because of a germination rate may be low, but it's certainly something to think about if you don't want to throw any seeds away. However, now I've gone through all my seeds, I've written this list out, and I will try and transfer this list onto a spreadsheet on the computer. I've got to admit, I'm not very good when it comes to spreadsheets. I am a bit of a pen and paper guy, but a spreadsheet does seem to be a very popular way of keeping track of what seeds we have. But I'll transfer that over onto the spreadsheet and I will look over my list and just make a note of any other seeds that I want to order. So while I have plenty of tomato seeds, I probably won't need to order any of those, but I don't have any of my blight resistant tomato seeds, so I'm going to have to order some of those. And it's the same with many other varieties. There's a carrot variety that I have found that we can sow throughout December. And that variety I don't have at the moment, so I'm going to have to get hold of that. So that's going on my shopping list for seeds as well. Now, this is a great time of year to actually go through seed catalogues that have been falling through the door, or more commonly now, more companies are moving to an online seed catalogues, particularly Premier Seeds Direct. So we will head there and we will go through all the seeds that we want to buy, have a look what other vegetable seeds that they might be selling, in particular any that catch our fancy. So for example, we had a great result with some of the seeds of the month throughout this year. The Zephyr F1 squash and the Dragon's Egg cucumbers. I've used all these seeds up, but they're going on my list for things that I absolutely have to buy. So they're going on my list for that as well. Now, the great thing with this is that I've got it all organised for 2025. My seeds have gone back into the fridge in an organised fashion with legumes in one box and brassicas in another box. Just means that they're easy to find and I keep them in alphabetical order as well. Just means that we really are going to find 2025 so much easier to come out and sow seeds in a bit of a rush. Being organised, being pretty practical at the same time. As I said, this is a great time of year to really sit down and go through our seed collection, because you can do this on these dark evenings or even a wet and rainy day, just in the shed or in a kitchen table. Now, talking of kitchen table, I'm going to head on inside to our kitchen where I'm going to be talking about microgreens and sprouting seeds as our seed of the month. So come meet me in there. In the meantime, let's find out what's been going on in the Supporters Club this week. Well, I'm just going to interrupt this podcast quickly and thank you so much for listening. Hope you're enjoying it. If you are, then please leave us a rate and review on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it means the world to us and helps us get found by more people. But not only that, if you are also really enjoying this podcast, then please consider becoming a member of our Supporters Club. For just £5 a month, you get access to extra behind the scenes podcasts and a collection of seeds sent to your door every month, and those seeds can be sown in that very month. Along with the seeds, you also get a copy of our mini newspaper, which gives you a bit of a guide on how to grow these seeds. All that for just £5 a month. Plus, it helps keep this podcast running. If that's something you would be interested in, then please head to the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk to find out more. Now, on the Supporters Club this week, I've been sharing how I go about planning for 2025. Bit of a head start for members of the Supporters Club. And I've also informed all our members what seeds they're going to be receiving this month as well. So if you would be interested in becoming a member of our Supporters Club, head to the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk. Well, I'm back in my kitchen now. As you know, I use my kitchen quite a lot at the moment for seed sowing. But one of the things that I'm going to be sowing quite a bit of throughout December is our microgreens and sprouting seeds, which brings us up quite nicely to our seed of the month in collaboration with Premier Seeds Direct. Now, Premier Seeds Direct are a fantastic resource if you are looking for any seeds, and I find their prices to be very, very reasonable. Now, we don't have a discount code for them anymore, but we do have an affiliate code. So if you would like to use that, just click on the link in the blog post for this episode. What we got in here is these sprouting seeds that we're going to be sowing today. Now, these are pea shoots, which are absolutely delicious, and they are a great way of getting some shoots to use quite quickly. We use these quite a bit in our Chinese stir fries, in all honesty with you. You may have heard of bean shoots in your Chinese stir fries, and that uses mung beans, which is also another type of sprouting seed we could use. But pea shoots are a really good alternative to mung beans, we've found. So how do we grow these, I hear you ask? Well, the traditional way that I've done in the past is that I put some seeds in the bottom of a glass jam jar, pour some water into the glass jam jar, and then put a piece of cloth over the top of the jar and hold it together with a piece of elastic. But I've moved away from that. I just found that the mouth of a jam jar was a little bit too small for getting my hands in. So what I use now is an ice cream container, and I do exactly the same thing with that. Just simply put the peas seeds in the bottom, add some water, and then put this cloth over the top, and I'll just leave that for 24 hours to soak. What I will then do the following day, just drain off all that water, rinse it out with some fresh water, just pour it through the cloth on top, swirl it around, and then pour that water out. And we're going to do this every day until we harvest these pea shoots. Now, the great thing about doing this is that by using this cloth on the top, our pea beans are not going to fall out. It just makes life a little bit easier and makes our time spent doing this seconds. So very, very simple and easy to do. And then once the shoots are, well, it might take about 3 to 7 days before they start to show signs of life. And once they are a few centimetres long, depending on how you want to harvest them, we simply harvest the pea shoots. We cut the peas off on the bottom, to be honest, but you don't have to. They can be used as they are, but we tend to cut the peas off and we just add those to our meals. Now, the great thing about this is that you can get some of these growing quite quickly, but another great thing is they don't use up much space, and we can have several of these going every few days so that we have a constant supply of these pea shoots or bean shoots, depending on what you're going to use. And there's a wide variety of seeds that can be used. Pea shoots are a great one. Chickpea seeds are another good one that we've been using as well. Mung beans, and even some of the other beans. I mentioned earlier that I'd sorted out my shed. Some of the pea and bean seeds that are going out of date, we use for this as well. Now, I did mention microgreens as well, and microgreens are another one that we love to grow here on our kitchen windowsill throughout the winter. What I tend to do with microgreens is I get a tray, put some tissue paper in the bottom, dampen the tissue paper down, and then scatter some microgreen seeds on top. Cress is a great example, but we can also use cauliflower, sunflower shoots, a whole wide range of different things that we can use for microgreens. And much like the pea shoots that we just spoke of, they're ready in a few days and we just cut them as we need them. Now, these together are not going to make a huge meal. They're more for a garnish, the exception being the pea shoots, because we do add those to our stir fries. And they are a bit of a garnish. They add a bit of crunch, a bit of flavour, but we find them great for using up leftover turkey from Christmas. We make turkey stir fries, or we might make a turkey soup with a bit of a cress on top as well, and it just adds a different dynamic, a different bit of fresh flavour to really liven up some of those leftover foods. And you know how it gets. You've had a few days of having turkey, you need to use it up, but you're bored of using turkey. This for us is a great way of making the most out of it. Now, talking of cooking, it's time to find out what Chef Scott has for us this week.
Chopping all the veggies, sizzle in the air. Chef Scott with the magic, smells are everywhere. Water starts to boil, onions hit the pan. recipe of the week. Let the feast begin. Cooking with Chef Scott, flavors come alive. Tune in every week for a tasty bite.
Hi, it's Scott here with this week's recipe. And this week we have a very simple sprout dish. Roasted sprouts with hot honey and feta cheese. Using just 4 ingredients, it's super simple but a great combo of flavours, and the hot honey will last forever. And if you grow and dry your own chilies, it's a great way to use them. And depending on what chilies you use, you can make it as hot as you like. So, let's head to the kitchen and hear how it's made. As usual, you can find this recipe and others on the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk and on my Instagram page, Seed to Table Plot 13. For this recipe, you will need 300 grams of honey, 1 teaspoon of dried chili flakes, 200 grams of feta cheese, and 600 grams of sprouts. Method: start by tossing the sprouts in a little oil, salt, and pepper, and place in an oven-proof dish and roast in a preheated oven set at 200 degrees Celsius for 15 minutes. Meanwhile, make the hot honey by gently heating the honey and chili flakes together for a couple of minutes. After the sprouts have had their 15 minutes, remove from the oven and place the block of feta on top of the sprouts, and then drizzle the feta and sprouts with some of the hot honey and return the dish to the oven for a further 5 to 10 minutes. Then serve, and that's the recipe done, and that's it from me this week.
Well, I'm in the podding shed now, and something I thought it would be good to come up with for 2025 is a seed sowing plan. Basically, a bit of a guide on what seeds to sow in each month. Now, you've probably seen the type of calendars that actually do this. You get them often in the back of magazines around this sort of time of year, and they hang on your wall. They give you a month-by-month guide of when to sow certain types of seeds. I find it to be very general though. They are not really suitable for different locations. They give a very broad range of when to sow the seeds. And as I've said a couple of weeks ago, very much depends on where you are in the country as to how successful seeds can be or how successful certain plants can be in your area. Now, what I could have done is gone through all my diaries over the years and find out when I've sown certain seeds. So, for example, seeds I've sown in December would include aubergines or the carrot seeds that I've sown in the past. But that would take quite a long time. And the trouble is when it comes up with taking a long time, it's not really something that we're going to do. So, I used something that I have dabbled with in the past. It's a new technology known as AI, and it's very up and coming. You've probably heard about it on the news. I have to admit, I'm not a fan of AI. I think it has its uses, and it is an upcoming technology, and I always try and keep myself ahead and updated when it comes to technology anyway, a bit like my granddad in that regards. And AI, we cannot ignore it. It is something that is going to be changing us. So I went to ChatGPT. How ChatGPT works is you enter a prompt, a question, and it will relay the answer to you. It's quite interesting when we play around with it, to be honest with you. But I entered a prompt and I said, I want a month-by-month list of edible plant seeds that I can grow in Littlehampton, West Sussex. I want the edible seeds to be extensive and include vegetables, fruit, herbs, edible flowers, companion flowers to be really extensive. Hit the answer and it came up with a very, very long list of all the seeds that we could sow. Gave me a good start of what we could do throughout 2025. Now, I've gone through this list and I've got to admit I'm quite happy with the results. Based on my own experience, it looks fairly close to what I would be sowing anyway. So it was a good little experiment to see if it could work, and it probably saved me a lot of work at the same time. There are a few things that I can throw in there that we could use instead, and there's certainly certain seeds. As I said earlier, there's a carrot seed that I have sown in December, which actually germinated, and that wasn't on the list, but it's certainly something that I can throw in there. Now, we could also change this up to be a weekly list, and if you are interested in this, I ask you to go and check it out and enter your own location to see what it comes with. The only thing I would say is that, of course, it is weather dependent. And what I mean by that is that it might be a very cold spring, in which case it's worth holding off sowing seeds for a little bit of time. So there's still a certain element of knowledge of your experience that comes into play with this seed sowing plan. But it certainly was a good experiment, to say the least, and it's certainly given it a good plan. Now, I'm going to try and use this in over 2025 and just see how well it works for me in my own garden and allotment. And I urge you to do the same. Now, if you're not a fan of AI, you want to avoid using it at all costs. I used to use a website called Garden Focused, and that would give you an idea on when to sow seeds, and you could change that to your location as well. And of course, there's some garden planning apps that have a similar sort of thing as well, similar feature. Now, we're coming to the end of this week's podcast, and at the end, and I asked you earlier, I asked you to rate and review. And I did actually get a rating and review on Spotify from Lynn. Lynn says, "Hi Richard, I listened to your answers on the last pod. Just found out the parish council puts rate bait on the plots, and I'm not sure how I feel about this. Is there any point? Just wondered what you thought. Thanks, Lynn." Now, I have got to admit, I am not a fan of using poisons. Even slugs and snails and rats, I am not a fan of using it. I will admit, I have used rat poison. A couple of years ago, we had rats in our garden, and I did use a rat poison to deal with those at the time. But that was coming from a place where I panicked. I was worried that my neighbours might see rats and complain about my chickens, and I have to get rid of my chickens. And I didn't like doing it. What I've been doing since then is I have been looking at other options. The reason that I don't like using poisons is that they can also not just poison rats, they can also poison other wildlife, hedgehogs and various other animals like that, especially birds of prey that eat the rats as well. So there are other options. There are some type of rat traps. They're humane. You can catch them and then you have to release them somewhere else. That is an option if that's something you want to do. There's also rat traps that are only suitable for rats, and they will electrocute the vermin as well, which doesn't use poisons either. That is another option. But for me, the options I would use are what I would call the natural options. So first on my list is dogs. Now, Roxy actually has caught a rat in our garden once before, and she caught it better than anything, better than anybody else. She shook it and killed it straight away. I will admit it did bother me a little about that, but it was a natural way of dealing with rats. Another option is cats. Now, some allotments will actually adopt a cat to stay on the allotment and deal with vermin in that case. It's definitely an option. We get a lot of cats in our garden and on the allotment that live locally, and I'm sure they will deal with the rats. But again, it's a natural option. It's certainly an option that we could use. The other ways that I like to do it is to encourage some of the rat predators. So birds of prey are a good one. We actually get a falcon that visits our garden quite regularly, and that will tackle rats as well. So putting up boxes or roosts for birds of prey, especially owls, they can deal with your rats for you in a much, much more natural way. And then, of course, foxes. foxes get a bit of a bad rap, especially if you have chickens, which I do kind of understand. But they will also hunt down rats as well. Again, these are all things that I think we should be encouraging into our garden, these nature or natural ways to encourage these things into our garden. Now, the other option that we should think about is how we prevent rats from being in our garden or allotment. Generally speaking, rats are after three things: food, water, and shelter. Well, food, it's good practice to not leave any food lying around, as I'm sure you're aware. Chicken food here comes in every night, and it's also in a type of feeder that rats cannot get into. Vegetables as well, of course, we all our vegetable scraps go into our wormeries, which rats cannot get into. We don't put them in compost bins for that very reason, but they will go into wormeries, which rats cannot get into. Water can be a bit of a problem, because if we're leaving water out for hedgehogs or bird baths and things like that, and puddles as well, rats are going to be drinking that water. And if you've got a pond as well, they can be drinking water from that as well. So water can be a very difficult one to try and prevent from rats. And then the third thing they are obviously after is shelter. Now that could be compost bins or under sheds. Again, difficult to control. Compost bins, if you knock on your compost bin every day, that should stop any rats from, because they don't like noise, should stop them from nesting in there. Under sheds, that can be a little difficult, but I'm told if you play a radio or something like that, that might be enough to disturb them as well. They don't like noise, so that's an option to think about. But the reality is, they say you're never more than 6 foot away from a rat at any one time. Rats do get a bit of a bad rep, I have to say. They're associated with the plague, of course, which did spread disease. And rats can spread disease, don't get me wrong. But they are part of our ecosystem. They are part of nature. So, how we deal with them is completely up to you. But I would prefer to try and encourage natural ways. Birds of prey, owls, owl boxes, foxes, etc., etc. Now, if anybody has any other options, then please do share them with us. We would love to hear that. And I think Lynn would like a few options to pass on as well. Now, if you want to get in touch, my email address is richard@theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. You can, of course, leave a comment on the bottom of a blog post. Or if you visit the website at theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk, you can leave us a voicemail. Please consider becoming a member of our supporters club. It helps keep this podcast running. And of course, don't forget to follow us on social media. We will be back again next time. So until then, please take care.